Good evening, everyone. I'm your host, comedian, magician, Danny Whitson. But it's all tricks aside, because tonight we're turning the paranormal into the normal. Join me as we explore the gray areas of reality. We're going to talk all things paranormal, UFOs, ghosts, cryptids, and aliens, and see how it's all connected. This podcast is brought to you by the Experiencer Support Association, and we are live. So if you're an experiencer yourself, or you're just plain nosy, be sure to send me your question and subscribe to the podcast. Now, get ready, because it's going to get deep. No, really, we're going to go way out there, because this is Beyond the TinFoil Hat. What's happening, my paranormal junkies? Welcome to Beyond the TinFoil Hat, and I'm your host, comedian, magician, Danny Whitson. We got a great show for you tonight, though, guys. We do. I hope you guys have been keeping the paranormal normal like always, and you've had a fantastic week. Speaking of which, earlier this week, I don't know if you guys have heard, but a really cool UFO story came out. Apparently, Michelle Reyes spotted a flying tic-tac cylinder-shaped object outside of her window over LaGuardia Airport in New York City. Well, I don't have the video, but we did have the picture. It just popped up there. If you guys get a chance, right there it is. Check it out. But there's a video that you guys can go on Google and just Google UFO LaGuardia Airport, New York City, and you can actually see the actual video of this thing. And it's really impressive. Really impressive. First of all, you got to think, a jetliner, coming into the airport about 200 miles an hour. This thing is moving faster than that. It comes right up to her window. I mean, not right up to the window, but you could see it plain as day. And then the thing is gone. This is impressive. I think it's way too fast to be a drone, way too high up to be a drone. I don't know what it is. I don't know, but definitely go check it out. You can go hop on Google, find it right away. It's hot news. UFO, LaGuardia Airport, New York City. Big shout out to Michelle Reyes for coming forward with this information. Really cool stuff. If you guys have not done so, head over to our Patreon page, Heed the World, and please donate. Like I said, with your donation, I think like a $4 donation, you get access to some of Ryan Stacy's really good articles and stories, some of his investigations, some information that he is getting out there to us. And so it's just like $4. You get a lot of cool stuff. And always head over to the experiencersupport.org. And there's articles, interesting stuff there to check out. And if you have any stories yourself, anything that you would like Ryan to investigate for you, contact him at the experiencersupport.org, and he will get back with you and try to help you as much as he possibly can. All right, let's get moving. Tonight's guest. This is a good one. I think this is a very interesting guest. This guest, he's an author of 13 published books, okay? Mostly known for his pioneer research in Christian Ufology. Yes, Christian Ufology. So we got religion and the paranormal, I guess. Kind of blend there. He's got and he's a combination of ancient astronaut theory. So that's interesting. So if you guys will, tune in and let's have a conversation with tonight's guest, John Milor.
Howdy. How's it going?
How you doing, John?
Doing really good.
All right. Well, I tell you what, John, some cool stuff right off the bat. But if you don't mind, do you care to introduce yourself a little more in depth to the viewers?
Okay. Yeah, part of my story, my backstory and everything is a really in-depth introduction. Kind of goes how I got into this, but aside from going back to 5 years old and working up to the present, I am former military, retired military actually, retired Chief Master Sergeant here at the 144th Fighter Wing in Fresno. We were a four-corner unit, and so I have that extensive military history, but I'm also into cybersecurity. I was the cyber chief, and now I work in the utility sector for cybersecurity. Um, and I have all kinds of different things that I'm interested in, practically everything. I do have 5 degrees. 2 of them are master's degrees. So a lot of the academia is just to say that I know how to do research. The books that I write, um, several of them, and in this genre, those are research oriented. So they required me to do a lot of study. And basically, what happened to me starting from my early childhood is, I had a grounding in the faith from my great grandmother, but both of my parents were uh, not practicing any kind of faith. My dad used to make fun of it and tease that he was a pagan and proud of it. Um, my mom was kind of like a hippie farm girl type, very unusual person, open-minded, kind of fancied herself as a white witch because of all the paranormal things that had happened to her in her life and her connection with nature and animals in general, which is just really unusual. And she passed some of that on to me. But in terms of believing the Bible, she had a respect for Jesus and who he is, but like she was upset, that he got murdered. So that kind of like totally misses the entire point that Jesus went to the cross because he chose to. He literally said at any given point he could have summoned a legion of angels to take him off of the cross if he wanted to. He chose to go there. Uh, the day, the time, the circumstances, everything. There was no mystery to him.
Well, let me ask you real quick, John. Okay,
Yeah.
so your family wasn't the traditional Christian type style family, like you said.
My mother, who raised me, because my mom and my dad divorced when I was a baby, was a hippie.
Okay,
But she would drop me off at my great grandparents every now and then, and they were exactly like my great grandfather was a minister. And uh, I got some pictures here to go with this if you want to bring that up. Um, so, starting at about 5 years old, here I am, is a picture of me when I was 5. My mom would drop me off at my great grandparents' house. You see the Ford Pinto there in the driveway. It's an old picture. It's 1975, and they
this is
traveled
so.
all over the all over
I've
the
never in a
United
million years thought I
States.
would see Billy Graham and a UFO over his head. The you got to think Billy Graham. Okay, where I'm from, folks. Okay, I'm from East Tennessee, and Billy Graham is like a major religious icon
He's a
figure.
Protestant pope,
Yeah,
basically.
That's our Pope. That's the Baptist Pope, Billy Graham.
Closest you get to it. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's
Um,
interesting.
so they traveled during the Great Depression, which you had these people living in tents and stuff like this back then, and they traveled from town to town, living out of their car for months at a time for years. And they did big tent revivals and things like that. So they lived by the faith and uh, were very godly people. My great grandmother always reading the Bible every time I came over. And, one time I asked her, I mean, you're always reading that. Are you ever going to finish reading the same book? And she said, "Oh, I've read it 27 times. I'm on my 27th reading of it." So it was just something that she always did. And the TV was on in her house. It was Billy Graham or some other evangelist. The radio was on, it's playing gospel music. Just her. She was all about Jesus. And to say that she's a Christian mystic, I would say that Pentecostal, and she had some unusual stories. For example, she said that one time she was choking from carbon monoxide poisoning, and she prayed to God to help her because she thought she was going to die. She was paralyzed and couldn't move. Suddenly, her bedroom door opened up, and this guy, a soldier with a pickle hob helmet, just like this guy right here, walked into her room, grabbed her, rolled her over, and she could instantly start breathing again. And she got a good look at him. He was some soldier of some type with this unusual helmet. So the description of an angel would be very unusual. He saw that she was okay, turned around and walked out. She immediately got out of bed and went into the living room, and the door was shut with a chain across the door. Had no idea how that guy got in or out of the house. When she was later in life, had a stroke, almost killed her. She was paralyzed from head to toe on the left side of her body. She could not move, and she couldn't talk. Doctors weren't sure if she would ever recover from it. She said Jesus walked into her hospital room, physically manifest, glowing, and he smiled at her. And when he did, she was instantly healed. And he turned around and walked back out. So when the doctors came in, she liked sitting there, can you please take the IV out? I'm ready to go home now. So they were kind of shocked, and she was just really happy and giving praise to God and saying, oh, well, Jesus came in and he healed me. And that's what she told everybody. So as hard as that might be to believe, why would at the same time, it was kind of believable if Jesus is going to appear to somebody, it would be someone like her. That's kind of just what people figured. And, the fact that she had that miracle to go with it kind of gave it some weight. She also saw her son-in-law in the spirit after he died. So that's not a normal thing that Christians normally report, that, seeing a loved one after they died. She had no problem with this. She just told us one morning, reading the newspaper, just made this passing comment. Oh, I saw Charles standing in the spirit, standing at the foot of the bed there this morning. He was young again and glowing and very handsome. And then he just disappeared. She mentioned it like it's a casual thing. And the day before she died, she told her daughter that she saw her husband standing in the spirit at the foot of her bed. And he had his hands out, reaching toward her. And
now he had passed.
And he had passed a couple years before. And she told her daughter, my grandmother Ruth, she said, I am going to go very soon. Like, I had the option this morning and I almost went. So I just wanted to let you know my time is just about up. The next day she died. So this was the kind of person she was. I consider that kind of like a Christian mystic. But then we move into the other part of the story where Grandma is the one who actually introduced me to the idea of, UFOs. And one time we were all over at her house. It was some kind of family gathering. I was 5 years old. So I didn't have a whole lot of information other than we watched Star Trek, when I was a kid and other shows and stuff. But Grandma was reading the newspaper, and I think it was like Thanksgiving or something like that. And there's all these people over, and Grandma makes a family announcement, and she hushes everybody up. She said, I have something to say to everybody. When I was a little girl, well, hold on. And then she started reading this newspaper article. She had a newspaper article in her hand, and it was like one of these right here, and it was about a wild goose chase between some police officers, and they were chasing a UFO around the outskirts of Madera County. And everybody's kind of looking at her and sort of looking at each other and with these confused expressions. And I was picking up on it, even at 5 years old. I thought, why is everybody looking like this? You could have heard a pin drop. And then when she finished reading this newspaper article, she dropped the paper and she said, when I was a little girl, I saw a UFO. And she proceeded to tell the story, and it looked something like this, just like the one you were talking about, the cigar-shaped UFO.
Yeah.
And she said this one had a glass bubble on top, and this thing flew by really slow and so close they even saw the guy turn his head and look at him as he flew by. And it was her and her sister that saw it.
And what year was this?
This was like turn of the century, around 100 years ago, 1910, something like that. Wow. She was a little kid.
Okay. let me do this because I love how you're doing this, and this is super very interesting. We do got our first question that popped in real quick, John. So
Okay.
we got Dawn Marie Peterson, one of our very own Tessa members here. She says, "I once cut grass with JC, which I'm assuming Jesus Christ. I too blamed for his murder. He told me his sacrifice was that he could become multidimensional, as he was God's only begotten son, and no other reality knew of him before then. He was solely ours." So
I would have to say that I've recently contemplated some things about him. Not so much the multidimensional, but I guess that you could consider it multidimensional because I think of him as the Alpha and the Omega, beyond time. So, yeah, the Father is outside of time space. Jesus said no one has seen the Father except him. So that means all these visitations and communications between God and people in the Old Testament, that was Jesus. So it occurred to me, where did this body that he had come from, this pre-incarnate body? And then my first thought was that he just like made one, temporary body before he was born. But then it occurred to me, he is transcending time. So there's no reason why he couldn't have spoke his body into existence in the womb of Mary and had been born as a human being, lived, was crucified, died, resurrected, ascended to heaven, then went back in time and created all life in the universe. Because the Bible actually says that he's the firstborn of all creation. So I always wondered, how could he be the firstborn if he's born, he had a mom, so obviously she was born before him, but he's the Alpha and the Omega. Before Abraham was, I am. That's what he said. So he always referred to himself as transcending time. And if God entered time space and needed a body for that to interact in time space, he did it through the body of Jesus. And then he went back in time to create time space. So he would be multidimensional because the universe, the heavens, includes a multidimensional universe. We live in a multiverse. And part of what my research covers is the multiverse. So you're right on target with pretty much my research and everything that I've uncovered through years of research in the Bible.
Well, great question, Don. Thank you so much for that question. Back here to the story. So your grandmother saw this UFO, and so she's telling how she saw this.
Yeah. So she tells the family this, right? And she runs home. Her and her sister run home. And they tell their mom about it. So this was back at a time, they'd never even seen a vehicle before, right? They had a wagon like this.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. This is before, people weren't driving cars.
They lived on the plains of Kentucky out in the middle of nowhere. So, they had never seen a car before, never seen a motorized contraption, yet they saw this thing fly by in the sky. So this is like Cuckooville. And their mom heard the story, and she told them, don't ever say anything to anybody about this story ever again.
And by the way, keep in mind, guys, back then, that's how it was. When people saw certain things, they were told, don't ever speak of this again. Keep this. And that was a very common way how they dealt with what they couldn't explain. We just don't talk about it.
So, like, to give you an idea of her mother once caught her and her sister playing with a deck of cards. And she took those cards and she threw them in the oven and burned them.
The devil's
because right here, you see back then people got shot in card games, so ain't gonna have no card games in this house, period. And so their mom, when she put her foot down, they did what they were told. And they didn't tell anybody. Not too long after this, her sister died. So Grandma Thelma had this story cooped up inside for 70 years. And it was just in the back burner, and suddenly she reads this article in the newspaper that night with the whole family there, and she just, okay, I got to get this off my chest. And after she tells us the story, she sums it up by saying, I don't care what people think. Those things are real. And she just left it at that. Mic drop. And everybody's like looking and like, oh, okay, that's really interesting, Grandma. Except you could tell there was just really kind of some confusion there. Um, but I'm just like, you could see the question marks formulating above my head, right? And I'm like, I was this kind of kid that I had questions about everything. And I was the kind of kid that would drive a lot of adults nuts because they kept asking why, and they'd give an answer, and then I'd ask why to that, and I was trying to get to the root cause of the universe, right? And I had all these existential questions that I always asked my mom, right? And she would humor that. She wouldn't like put a clamp on my curiosity. Instead, she would give these in-depth answers, and sometimes we could sit and actually literally talk for an hour while she's answering questions, one question after another, until I'm finally, okay, I'm done now, you know? So I had all these questions and, okay, what was grandma talking about? UFO that she saw. That's nothing I ever heard from her before. And mom said, well, Star Trek, we watch Star Trek. And like, yeah, yeah. And she said, well, that's probably a lot more real than what people think. And so I just kind of put put myself in park on that, and I just accepted it. And Jesus is real, the Bible's real, Star Trek is probably real or some version of it. It's all out there. It's part of my reality. I have a bigger reality than a lot of people. And most kids do have a larger reality, and then that reality shrinks as they become adults. Mine didn't. Mine continued to grow because things would happen to me in life that I wouldn't filter out, paranormal type experiences and stuff. And instead, I would ask questions because I'm a question person, seeker. And, more and more paranormal things continue to happen in my life, and it builds up over time. We always watch shows like In Search of, too, because that kind of dovetailed over with, Star Trek because it had Leonard Nimoy narrating it.
Oh yeah, great show. That was a great show growing up.
And then I guess my mom decided to save herself some time with, questions that were brought up about these paranormal things in the show. She got this Time Life subscription. I used to think it was Reader's Digest, but I think it was actually Time Life. And it was a multi-volume encyclopedic set of the paranormal.
Was that not the greatest? I remember. Was it the Time Life commercials where they did the whole set on the paranormal that you could order?
Yes, I think that might have been. We had a big set. It was 24. I think it was 24 volumes. When those things would come, starting 5 years old, I am reading about, past life regression, hypnotherapy, tarot cards, interpreting dreams, palmistry, clairvoyance, psychometry, retro recognition. I mean, I was like Fox Mulder by the time I was 10. I could just, walk into an unusual situation and give you 5 possibilities of what something could possibly be of a paranormal nature. So that was kind of just who I came to be. And it kind of grew. But I wasn't the only one in my family. My sister kind of fed into this as well because she was sort of into ghosts and anything unusual and stuff. And aside from terrifying me half the time, sometimes she would come in like older sisters can do and talk about how all the teddy bears came to life and snuck into the tool shed and grabbed all the tools and sawed the little kids in half, because they were beating the teddy bears up, and then good night, sweet dreams, and then leave, and I'd be terrified. So she would do those kind of insidious things from time to time, but she used to talk about how, when she died, she wanted to be a ghost, and talked about a haunted house down the street and all of this stuff about ghosts. And
let's stop right there because that's interesting. I've thought about that a lot, and I think that would suck.
It would.
A lot of times when I think about, man, when I die, God, how bad would it be suck to be stuck in a museum or a field or a house or gosh, that'd be horrible. I don't know, man. I hope when I die that I go to wherever the cool place is to be, and you know what I mean. Even if it is the cliche thing, I hope I get to hang out with the people that I miss and I love. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's just hope that we can hope that's play out. Because I don't want to hang out my damn in this some crap town and having to deal with people and a bunch of annoying ghost hunters. That would suck.
Or have some restricted barrier, like you're grounded to this house.
Oh,
You can
absolutely. Have you
only
ever
perceive
seen?
reality in this house. Yeah.
Have you ever seen the movie Ghost? Not
Yes.
not 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 the Patrick Swayze. What is it? Is
Oh,
it Ghost Story? I think it's called
yes.
with Casey
That's about a
Affleck.
haunting, right?
Well, this is almost like a realistic point of view. If you die and you are a ghost and you're stuck and you have no concept of a time schedule, and basically you're just like a conscious entity existence. It's one of the most interesting, boring, depressing, and cool movies I've ever seen. I think it's called Ghost Story with Casey
Okay.
Affleck.
Yeah.
So
No, I can't say that I've seen
if
that.
you could probably catch it on Prime or if you just gave it a Google search, Ghost Story, Casey Affleck. It's an interesting story, man. It really is. Definitely check it out.
I'm making a note
Yes,
right
Live
here.
Light has got she gives the shout out. It's the Time Life Mysteries of the Unknown 33 volume set, 1987 through 1991. Yes, Live Light is correct. Those things were awesome. I remember watching those as a kid and be like, gosh, I want that. I want those.
Yeah. Okay, so flash
Yep.
forward 18 years old. I was 17. I signed up, joined the Army Infantry, and then immediately went off to the Army when I got out of high school. And I was an oddball in the Army,
An
Army
oddball
Infantry
in the
in
Army.
particular. Infantry in particular, because they're the ground pounders, the Neanderthal caveman type, which was part of my personality. I mean, I lived part of my childhood in Arkansas, running around in the woods, and I was a free range kid, really kind of wild, and had more energy than I knew what to do with. So I thought, well, I'm up for some high octane stuff, leaping out of helicopters and running around shooting stuff, and that sounded like a recruiter made it sound like a glorified camping trip. It's not camping, but
Oh yeah,
uh,
yeah.
so anyway,
Disney World.
I really set the tone for myself. I was set. Went to Fort Ord over here. This is back my unit, and I set the tone for the next 3 years. I really kicked myself in the foot because we had this land navigation exercise in like the first 2 weeks there at the base. And land navigation is where you get a compass, you learn how far you walk with, they call it your pace count, how many steps it takes to do 100 meters or whatever it is. So you learn how to read topologies on maps and then find your way around in the middle of nowhere using a map and a compass, old school. And they had all these targets like poles with a sign buried in some brush somewhere. And if you did everything right, you would find the GPS coordinates to these different targets that were all over the base. And Fort Ord is 20 square miles. So you could go 5 miles in any given direction and searching around for these different targets. And turned out my team leader knew all the targets. He had them memorized. He'd done land navigation on the base so many times, he didn't feel like doing it. And I was teamed up with my team leader. And he said, well, I'll tell you what, let's break away from everybody and kind of go over here and hide out under these trees for about 2 hours, and then we'll go turn in our sheet. I'm not going to argue with him. I'm like, well, personally, I would rather wander around and find the targets and, get some experience land navigating, but he didn't feel like doing it, and I'm not going to buck the system. I'm certainly not going to narc him off. So we all went and chilled out under a tree, and we're just sort of sitting around, and I'm thinking, okay, you got birds chirping and all this nature going on, and it's kind of like a camping trip. what do you do when you're on a camping trip? You tell ghost stories. And just didn't have a campfire, but we're in the nature. And I thought, well, this is kind of one of my favorite questions that I used to ask people anyway. I would always have this question and I like to open up. And being young, I wasn't very savvy yet, figuring out how to orchestrate a conversation to squeeze something in. Like, what's the most unusual thing you've ever seen or had happen to you?
Yeah.
It takes some social savvy to actually whip out a question like that without somebody getting weird on you. So I just popped it out of the blue, said, Corporal, have you ever seen a ghost? And he about jumped out of his skin, just me asking the question. And I'm thinking he probably thought that there was something like this right behind him, it was ridiculous. The way he acted, he literally jumped, and then everybody laughed, and then he made me do some elevated push-ups and started yelling at me, and then everybody's just really got a kick out of that question, and that was like fuel for the next half hour of total roast. They were ripping out one thing after another. People I didn't even know were making fun of me for like the next half hour. And I'm like scratching my head, like, I didn't intend it to be a funny question. It's just a question. And as much as I defended myself every time I opened my mouth, well, then, the Army is one of these, you could probably call it a boot camp for comedy, because people learned expertise on roasting, especially drill sergeants. They're really good at just tearing people up. But yeah, that was the next 3 years. I got a couple of nicknames that I never got out of. So I pretty much owned it. I got to where I didn't care. And I found a very small group of people, like 3 or 4 guys that played Dungeons and Dragons. And so I sort of fell into Dungeons and Dragons as my escape. More paranormal type stuff there. So I memorized all the, monster manuals, deities and demigods. They had the Dungeon Master then. He was had a game that was a 3rd generation game, 30 years old.
And let me ask you, John, what year time range was this?
So I joined the Army in 1988.
Okay, so this was late 80s, early 90s. And if people don't remember, because I sure as hell do, Dungeons and Dragons wasn't nowhere near as accepted back then as it is now. Now it's a very popular game. It's considered to be one of the pioneers of a lot of these role-playing style games. But back then, Dungeons and Dragons was satanic, and people, it would make
even though I didn't think so.
You would commit suicide. Don't play Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, they had this movie called
They
Monsters
had that
and
movie,
Mazes.
that after-school special thing.
Yeah, Monsters and Mazes. One of the characters loses his mind, and
yeah. So I mean, that was like, so man, you were. So we got to say this right off the bat, dude. For you to be around in an environment like the Army, and being brave enough to get your D&D-ing, I mean,
I even posted this on my door. So I was like, okay, you know what? I'm just going to freaking own it. These people are going to tear me apart all the time anyway. I'm going to be who I'm going to be, and I don't give a flying rip.
Yeah.
It earned me a lot of heartache. If I could do it again, I probably wouldn't be so brazen in everybody's face about it, even posting this goofy thing on the door. But I did. I had my section of the room. There was a shelf, and I had all my paranormal books there, crystal ball.
Well, I think that's also a little badass of you, man, because some people do the complete opposite. Some people fold, but you were like, screw this, I'm the minority here in this group, but I'm going to be loud and proud, of my geekism. Let me say this real quick. Live Light did post source of that movie, A Ghost Story, 2017 with Casey Affleck and Rooney Mars. Guys, afterwards, maybe sometime this weekend, if you get a chance, watch it. It's a great movie. John, you watch it. And then Don Marie Peterson says D&D forever.
I was a dungeon master after I got out of the Army for a little while.
And Monsters and Mazes, 1982 with Tom Hanks. Live Light says, there we go.
Yep. And then I think when Lord of the Rings movies came out, and then it became more widely known, the fact that what's his name, J.R.R. Tolkien himself was a theologian. I mean,
yeah,
and a lot. There's just so much symbolism. Every other character is a messianic character. I mean, Return of the King. How on the nose do you get with that? So when you actually look at the story, remove the wizard, all wizard evil, surface level analysis of it, and look at it for what it really represents. It's basically another version of the Bible. It's so he kind of like brought Dungeons and Dragons back, a revitalization of J.R.R. Tolkien kind of brought Dungeons and Dragons, gave it a facelift, so to speak, so people weren't so totally,
well, most people tend, they freak out and they misdiagnose what they don't understand.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of something that happened with Dungeons and Dragons, and even if people didn't know better about Lord of the Rings, they would do the same thing.
Mm-hmm. So my second year in the Army, the Panamanian conflict broke out, and we shipped off to Fort Sherman, which is right here. And they didn't have a fence around the back of the base, but it was jungle. They literally had their own zoo at this base. And they had these spiders that were like bigger than my hand, and they weren't
holy caca.
Bugs. Oh my goodness. The bugs alone would eat you alive. They had sections of the jungle there that you would see several hundred square feet blanketed in 2 to 3 inches thick carpet of ants that was the ground would move.
That's disturbing and scares the hell out of me. But is that a little girl eating a tarantula? Is that
yeah, I just threw that in there.
I'm gonna have nightmares. That's what scares me right there. Okay. So.
They had quadamundi in there. They had panthers in the jungle, and they had all of these things that were deadly enough as it is. The plants attack you, the bugs attack you, and other things. But we were having to go out there and do perimeter guard watch and stay out there in the middle of the night in the jungle for a while. And it was there that I encountered the greatest, most magnificent paranormal experience that I had up until this point. And that's saying a lot.
Here's the good stuff, folks.
So we had what you call sheet lightning going on in the sky, and it looks kind of like this haziness in the sky, this sort of kind of fog blended into cloud, overcast, but it's not really defined clouds. There's so much humidity in the atmosphere there. And there would be these like fluttering, flickers and fluttering of light in this haziness. So we saw that all the time, and it's easy to just dismiss because it doesn't look like regular lightning, but that's what it is up behind the clouds. But it was near the end of my watch around midnight that I noticed something that looked kind of like this picture here, that there was some of this fluttering, flickering light down in the jungle under the trees, under the canopy. And it was a really thick canopy of jungle there. And so I'm like, what is that? Finally it got my attention. I had like the 1,000-yard stare, not getting any sleep. But then I saw this, and eventually it came visible that it was this ball of light about the size of a soccer ball, and it would flash on like an instant, like somebody's walking through the jungle with a camera, a giant flash bulb attached to a camera and taking pictures or something. Because the ball was about the size of a soccer ball, and it looked like it was pure electricity, and it would illuminate the whole jungle when it flashed on. But it was just an instant, just flash. And when it wasn't flashing, you couldn't see anything. You couldn't hear anything. It's like it wasn't there. And I first spotted it maybe 900 yards out or so, and every time it flashed on, it would be a little closer, and every 30 seconds or so, it would flash. And it was making a beeline for our position. I picked up these night vision goggles I had, AMPVS-7, and I'm looking through these. I'm not seeing anything when it's not flashing. So it's literally not there. And I'm scratching my head going through my Rolodex, in my head, like, okay, ball lightning, swamp gas. It's not either of those. It's not acting like them. Ball lightning tends to be perpetually on until it hits something and diffuses.
Yes.
Swamp gas tends to have a greenish, misty color to it, and it's more like a mist. It doesn't have a very well-defined shape most of the time. It doesn't flash on and off like a light. So this was really unusual that was coming my way. And so it was near the end of my shift, and the guy that happened to be with me was my team leader, and he was the leader of the pack of mockery. He was the one who was the grand poobah, making fun of me more than anybody else put together. And I'm sort of just sitting there staring at this thing, and I'm wondering, this is an opportunity. If this is what I think it is, it may be a different kind of life form than we formally know to exist.
Now, was this it? Okay, because you said it wasn't swamp gas, it wasn't ball lightning. Did it kind of move almost like an intelligent, like it knew you guys were there? Do you feel like
it was making a beeline for our position?
Okay,
it was coming straight toward us. So as I'm thinking about this thing, I'm wondering, why is it coming straight here unless it's coming to investigate? And I thought, well, this thing looks like it's electricity. If it is some kind of new kind of ball lightning I haven't heard of or whatever, I better not wear this M60. So I took my M60 off because it's metal, and I thought this thing should be attracted to it. We also had a backpack with a bunch of lithium batteries, large lithium batteries to power the radios that we had, the field radio, and a 6-foot whip antenna coming out of it. I'm like, this thing's a lightning rod. With this huge antenna going down to this radio with all these lithium batteries, I would think a lightning would be attracted to that as well. So I put the gun, the rifle with the backpack, kind of distanced myself from them a little bit. And then I woke up my team leader, and I'd already thought in my head, you know what? I'm not going to pass up this opportunity. I'm going to have to try to talk to this thing because it's acting intelligent.
Okay.
I can't pass this up.
So where we're at right now at the moment, you're not the only one seeing this. The team leader has seen this too, correct? Or
not yet.
Not
He's
yet.
Asleep. I'm waking him up.
Okay. You're waking him up. But he is the guy who likes to roast you. He is the biggest skeptic of the whole group, correct?
He is.
Okay. But right now, you are the first one to see this, and you are the only one seeing this at the moment, correct?
This is correct.
Okay. This is what we're going to do, John. I love this story. Super interesting. I am hooked. We're going to cut to some messages, give a quick shout out to our sponsors. We'll be right back, folks, with the rest of this story. This is where it's getting really good. We'll see you guys right back here in a few.
Have you ever wondered, or maybe just thought to yourself, if there were others just like you? You know, people with extraordinary abilities, psychogenic advancement, and perhaps unique intuitions. Maybe you just wondered if there were other people who experienced unimaginable, unexplained, or even unusual and paranormal events. Are there people who have more questions, more fears than answers? Well, you're not alone. You've never been alone. We believe you. Sign up for EA today.
Business. It's your property. Your assets are worth protecting. Blacklight Investigative and Surveillance Services specializes in patrolling and inspecting residential or commercial property against fire, theft, vandalism, terrorism, and illegal activity. People and buildings are monitored to prevent crime. Keep your property, your people, and your assets safe from threat. Our elite staff are dual licensed private investigators and security guards. Blacklight Investigative and Surveillance Services. Go to blacklightiss.com.
All right, guys, welcome back. If you're just now tuning in, we are here with John Milor, and you are in the middle of telling us this very interesting story. Actually, I think it's your first encounter with a UFO. John, go ahead and proceed with the good stuff.
Okay. All right. UFO or an entity anyway.
Yes.
Whether it was an alien or not, I still don't know. But so I'm sitting here and I'm contemplating this, and it occurred to me that I was in a very unique position for vindication, because I was about to introduce the biggest skeptic of anything slightly out of normal, unusual, whatever, to something that it was in his face that he couldn't deny. And I thought, this is going to be good, because, now he's on my turf. And I'm going to put on my Captain James T. Kirk hat, and I'm going to announce myself as, coming in peace. And this is going to be first contact. And he's going to witness me having first contact, trying to communicate with an alien life form.
So let me ask you this, because this is interesting on what you were actually feeling. Okay, now you were a fan of the paranormal, before this, and a believer. You heard stories growing up, but dude, you're in the jungle, bro. You're out here. You're away from home. you're basically, you don't really have any real friends. And here you are with the biggest a-hole that you've ever known. And you're experiencing this glowing thing coming towards you, making a beeline straight towards you. And instead of fear going through your head, you're thinking, oh, you're going to believe me now, I'm going to get you now,
Yes,
So
exactly. Exactly.
that's it.
I had absolutely no fear in my mind whatsoever. He was telling me not to put down my weapon. So I woke him up and I told him, it's time for your shift. And by the way, there's this glowing ball of light there in the jungle. It's coming right over here. And good night. I had no intention of going to sleep. I just laid it out like that. And I went to go over and acted like I was going to go to sleep. And he started cussing me out saying, what the hell are you talking about? And he's all looking around. And then he realized, he thought, oh, he's screwing with me, And then he really got pissed because he thought, because it was creepy out. You're in the jungle, right? It could be anything out there. But he's, in the middle of cussing me out, it flashed. And this time it's really pretty darn close. It's only like maybe 100 yards away at least, but not that far. And he caught it out of the corner of his eye and he looked and I said, see, that was it. I told you, I'm not screwing around with you. You're the one that likes to joke around. I'm telling you, there really is something out there. And it's coming right over here. I've been watching it for the last 5 minutes or so. And so he kind of got perked up and he's watching it. And then it got closer and this thing kept flashing and it got all the way up to about maybe 30 feet away. And it was 30 feet up in the trees. And when it got to that point, it stopped and it kept flashing in the same spot. And now I'm just like really intrigued. If my idea of first contact was just a vague idea, now it was really formulating in my mind because this thing is exhibiting true intelligence. It came to our position and then it stopped and it's checking us out. It's pretty obvious. And so I tell the corporal, I'm going to communicate with it. And he's telling me, no, absolutely not. And I already had my weapon off and he got mad at that. And I'm like, what, you expect me to shoot a ball of light? Like that's going to do anything? This thing is pure electricity. If it wanted to kill me, I'd be dead already. He's really upset. And then he starts contemplating, he goes into the denial phase, oh, maybe it's a laser. They're shooting some laser from the Gulf, the carrier out in the Gulf. And I said, laser requires a straight line of sight. You see all these trees. This thing's down under the trees in the jungle. This is not a laser. So at this point, he goes catatonic and he's not talking anymore. He just basically shut up and his just eyes were all saucered out and he was just not processing anymore. So I walked over into the slight little bit of clearing that was there near our position. And I stood there and I faced it and I introduced myself. I said, look, I'm just a human being out here in the jungle. I know that it may seem that, we're here invading your space, but, we mean you no harm. We come in peace. I have nothing against you. I'm just curious about what you are. And I just wanted to introduce myself to you. And if you would be willing, to, reveal yourself to me or try to communicate to me. Then the 30 seconds kind of came and went and it's not flashing anymore. So I'm like thinking, okay, what's going on? It's like thinking about a response or what? And suddenly I had this feeling come over me. So, the feeling that you get when you know that you're being watched?
Oh, yeah.
Amplify that by about 1,000. This feeling was so intense that I literally felt exactly where the presence of this thing was at. I could feel its presence, like GPS. It was letting me know I am over here. And then I felt it moving toward me. And so I'm narrating, I'm talking to the corporal, and I said, dude, I feel it moving. I feel it moving. I don't know how I feel it moving, but it's moving toward me. And I take a couple of steps back because this is just really intimidating. This thing emanated a presence that it was powerful. Whatever this thing was, it was really powerful because I felt it moving toward me.
Now, what is the corporal doing at this moment? I mean, is he still kind of just...
He shut down. He's just staring.
So he's seeing this, but he's not really knowing how to process because he's such a skeptic.
Yeah, he's shut down. I took a couple steps backward because I was kind of like, this thing is getting really up front and personal with me. I felt it moving, but I tried to suppress that the best I could, and I lifted up my night vision goggles, and I'm like, I still don't see it, but I feel it. And I said, oh, it's going right over my head, and I'm following it with the goggles, even though I don't see it. And I do a complete 180. This thing kind of lowered a little bit, and it flew right over the top of my head, and I felt it as it passed over me. And then it went behind me about maybe 30 feet, and then it kind of parked itself up in these trees. And I spun all the way around, was facing the opposite direction, and I had my goggles up, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, I point up in the trees, and I say, the next time it's going to flash right there. And when I pointed and said the word there, it flashed exactly where I pointed on cue when I said the word there. And wow. I was amazed. I was like, okay, you saw it. You saw it. This thing communicated to me. It wasn't a language, but it let me know that it was alive and that it was telling me, like, somehow transmitting its location to me.
Now, feet-wise, how far was that when it did that flash from where you guys were at?
About 30 feet.
Okay.
So I was shocked. I'm like, that confirms it. This thing is intelligent. This isn't a probe. So part of my mind, I was thinking maybe this is an alien probe or something. But no, this thing was alive. I could feel its presence. And I'm just going on and on, a chatterbox about this thing, just so excited. It didn't do anything like so totally extraordinary, like suddenly assume a human shape and then have a conversation with me or open a portal. No, nothing like that. It just let me know that it was there. It was alive. I'm convinced it could have killed me if it wanted to, but it didn't. It was curious. I kind of had this sense about it that it was just curious and wanted to know why we were out in this jungle, such a inhospitable place.
Well, do you
not
think
normal to get visitors out there?
You guys, okay, it was a conflict back then. Was this the thing that was going on in the Panama area?
Noriega, yeah.
The Noriega thing. And yeah. So, yeah, there was a little conflict down there with the Noriega thing. And you guys, I think, were trying to, there to kind of push him out.
We were there leading up to the main conflict. And then the Rangers came in, took the airfield, and we came in and backfilled them. And then went into the Panama City after that. We did patrols all over the city and stuff.
You even blasted music.
Yeah.
Everything. Yeah. So, okay, well, then let's back up to that because that's interesting because, there is a continuing thing and a lot of sightings around conflict areas, stuff like that, stuff that's going on. Mm-hmm. So do you think there was a possibility that this thing was there, to like, what's going on? What are you guys doing?
Very well could have been. Now, of course, it occurred to me later as I was just kept thinking about it that the description of a will-o'-the-wisp in the Dungeons and Dragons books, Gary Gygax wrote those books based on legends and stuff. So, all of the cryptids and stuff, a lot of them in there actually come from actual legends, from folklore and whatnot. The will-o'-the-wisp, which is actually featured in the cartoon, that actually had a very strong resemblance to this thing because where it lived, plus will-o'-the-wisp are known to try to evoke people's curiosity and then get them to follow them, and then you end up falling into a snake pit or some quicksand or something bad usually happens to you. They're generally not good. I didn't really get an alignment from this other than it kind of felt like some curious animal or a curious creature, but I honestly don't know. So I thought maybe it's a will-o'-the-wisp, but the thing certainly wasn't no dim little light sort of just bopping around. It flashed on and off, so it did have unusual characteristics, and I think it possibly could have been alien. Floating around.
it's exact similar sightings of this before. This is, and also in a similar environment. Where
Yeah.
they've seen this. I mean, there's even places like in the Blue Ridge Mountains, Smoky Mountains, where I'm from, that you could see these lights.
Mm-hmm.
So this is something, it's something people have definitely seen before.
Yeah. So now I'm going to kind of shift gears a little bit. And my time in the Army kind of got, I drank a lot and stuff to cope. And here's me over here, drunk as a skunk with all these guys partying out. And shortly after I got out of the Army, I really fell into, the occult big time. I actually got my house all totally haunted with poltergeists and stuff. I was messing with Ouija boards, channeling, astral projection, just all kinds of stuff, ghost hunting, everything.
Let me ask you real quick, John. Let me ask you the sighting in the jungle. Okay, back. I want to jump back to that.
Well, that fired me up. I mean, that just made me want to have another taste of the other side.
That sparked a curiosity that you couldn't turn off. Did you and the Colonel ever speak of that ever again? Did he ever talk to you about that?
It didn't get to the Colonel. The next day, I addressed the elephant in the room. Everybody got together from the other positions that were out in the jungle in different locations. It turned out this thing went to each position out there. So after it did what it did, it did a complete circle around our perimeter, flashing on and off as it went, to get a view of everything from a 360-degree view. It wanted to see every angle of our site.
So other people saw this, not just you.
Then it went down deeper into the jungle to other two positions, and it did a circle around them, flashing on and off as it went. And then it went off back into the jungle.
And no one ever had a freaking clue of.
It was curious. It wanted to see, like, what are you doing here? Poking around and I don't know if it was trying to get us to follow it or what. I mean, we're in guard duty, so we're not going to follow it. And it did a circle around two other positions. So the next day when everybody's there, nobody's saying anything. And I keep looking at the corporal and I'm waiting for him to open his mouth. He doesn't say anything. And so I mentioned, I said, you were at the other guard position, right? Who was awake around midnight? And so one of the guys, Winder, he speaks up and I said, okay, I saw a glowing ball of light flashing on and off about the size of a soccer ball. And after it went around our position and I actually interfaced with this thing, it went toward your direction. Did you see it? There's no way you could have missed it. This thing was bright enough, that light, you probably saw it from our position, much less. And I saw it headed toward you guys. And he said, I saw something. It was maybe a firefly or something. And I was like, a firefly? Dude, we've been seeing fireflies all over the place.
That's a big-ass firefly.
This is not a firefly. That's the size of a soccer ball. Did you see a light flashing on and off? And he just kind of really didn't admit it. And then the other guy was at another position, and he said, yeah, I saw something. I don't know what it was. They didn't want to talk about it, right? They were just completely vague. And I'm like, are you guys kidding me? And I said, Corporal, you were with me. You saw me literally communicate with it. Try to, and you saw what happened. It let me know where it was at. Somehow I knew where it was going to flash. And then after this silence, he says, well, I know exactly what happened. And I'm like, what? And he said, you summoned it. And then they all just started laughing their asses off. And then because I had this reputation of being a wizard, and they're like, oh, yeah, he's a wizard. He's all casting spells. And they're all joking on it. And then they're feeding off of each other's jokes. And it's getting worse and worse and worse. And I'm just like, you got to be freaking kidding me. You guys, don't you realize that isn't in any biology textbook? What you literally saw is something that science does not know exists formally. But the more I said anything, the more they just laughed and laughed, like everything that came out of my mouth was another joke.
Yeah.
And so I just clammed up after that. I didn't bother to bring it up to my commander. No way was I going to go there. And nothing happened with this. So other than just feeding my curiosity, and then I got more into the paranormal and stuff.
Now,
And
so you said when you got back home, you're out of the military.
yeah,
You got really heavy in the paranormal, and you said like what did you had hauntings and in your home, poltergeist experience?
yes, yeah. It really kind of peaked with a particular friend I had that told me about different things that happened during his childhood. He lived in El Salvador. He had all these cryptid experiences too. Encountered hellhounds. They had this thing called the chicken foot lady. Weird stuff. La Duenda. But he himself, I found, had supernatural abilities. Like one time I was talking to him on the phone, and he stopped during the middle of the conversation. He stopped me, told me to shut up, and said somebody was listening in on our conversation. And I said, no, I know what it sounds like when somebody picks up on the other line. Of course, this was a landline. It wasn't a cell phone. To answer the question, no.
No. Live like, yeah, she asked, did any of your jokester army buddies ever talk to you about the orb incident later in life? They never brought it back up, huh?
No. And I am friends with a few of them on Facebook, but I haven't brought it up either because I'm sure that would just open up a can of worms and they'd start making fun of me all over again. So,
okay.
Well,
they haven't done a Google.
Their mentality wasn't there,
They haven't. I mean, I don't know, man. It might be worth maybe next time you bump into him, maybe bring it up.
Yeah, I wish I could find the corporal. Yeah, he was a truck driver that lived in Michigan, but
oh my God, a Michigan truck driver! I don't know if I would do that.
Yeah, he fit the stereotype.
You poor soul.
Anyway, yeah, I got more into the stuff, and then with my friend, it got to this point where I had some faith, a little bit of faith, and I did notice that there was indications that this person was dealing with something demonic. And he said his uncle was actually a Satanist. So there were other things that were going on, but this person told me, interrupted me. It turns out there was somebody that was listening in on our conversation when we were talking on the phone. Somebody had snuck into my bedroom and was eavesdropping, standing behind me while I was sitting in my chair. So they weren't picking up a phone and listening that way. No, they were literally eavesdropping manually. Snuck up into my bedroom and were eavesdropping on my conversation, and I couldn't see him because the chair was facing away from the door.
So you were having a conversation with this guy over the phone, and he knew somebody.
He knew that somebody snuck in my room and was overhearing our conversation.
Wow.
And he refused to continue to talk, and it tripped the person out that was listening, that was overhearing, because as soon as he said as soon as he came up and he was outside of my bedroom door, the conversation changed, and I started saying, no, nobody's listening. I'm telling you, nobody's listening to this conversation. But the guy's like, how in the heck does he know that I'm outside a bedroom door? How does the person on the phone know that I'm outside this bedroom door? So there was this that happened. But other things happened. And
what made you think it was evil?
Glowing beams of red light coming out of his eyes. When he was a little kid. He said that when he was baptized as a baby, glowing beams of red light came out of his eyes, according to his mom.
Oh.
That and other things that kind of gave me a clue that maybe that was evil. Anyways, I later did an exorcism on that person, believe it or not. And that person is now a Christian, a born-again believer. But anyway, this kind of stuff was happening. And when I hit redial on the phone, so that I would start to talk about Jesus to this person, and the phone would get all staticky. And I was like, what the heck? And then it would hang up. But only when I talked about Jesus. And if I hit redial, if I dialed this person's phone number and I'm talking about Jesus, and then the phone would get static again and hang up, I would hit redial and it would say 666 on the display. So I'm getting kind of freaky,
Creepy.
you know, scared and kind of wondering. And then at the same time, my addictions were getting the best of me. I was like a huge party hound and in a really, really bad, dark kind of place, right? And not really taking life seriously. It was at that time that something, you know, with my grandmother, I still had this little bit of faith in me. My grandmother got me this little sign that I put on my wall when I was a little kid, and I always remembered it. And I would pray. And I had these dreams, these two different dreams when I was 12 years old of actually going to heaven. And I remember those dreams. Seeing the question, when you spoke to a Ouija, did you ask anything personal? Did you close it properly? Most people don't believe it's an entity who is its own force. No, I know that Ouija is its own force. I talked, me and a friend talked to something, and this thing, whatever it was, had a vocabulary that neither of us had. And we actually had a dictionary out, and we were looking up the words that it was using. And so how could something use a vocabulary that neither you or the other person have? And yet the words are accurate and they're in there. So yes, I have used Ouija boards. That board, we burned it. It was only coming through with evil things. And
So, okay, well, let's do this because, you know, Ouija boards, yes. Let's see. Absolutely. It is an entity. Don Marie, great question. Great thing to bring up about the Ouija. When you got back, so you're like, dude, you're like going wild. You're like jumping from here to there to there. You got a friend that's a demon. You gotta, I mean,
it was going downhill. I got into things where I was doing some stuff that wasn't entirely legal. And
I mean, of course,
it was getting dangerous. It was getting dangerous. And I believe what happened to me is that God paid me a personal visit, because my great grandmother died when I was off in Korea. So I didn't get to see her off. And the next year is when I had this dream. And it was during this time in my life. I was 21 years old. It was the darkest time of my life. That I had a dream that I was in this compound, like this drug type compound, with a friend of mine. And we didn't know how we got there. It was a cartel place. And there were these people with guns and stuff all around. And we were like scared for our lives. We couldn't get out of there. We felt trapped. We're like, how the heck did we even get here? You know, this is not good. And suddenly this helicopter came in. It was a Black Hawk and it landed. So this is a dream I'm describing. And I'm thinking this helicopter, God chose this helicopter because of my experience with helicopters. And, you know, I'd ridden in a lot of Black Hawks, both in the Army and even after the Army when I was in the Air National Guard. Over there on the right, we got to ride in a Black Hawk here in Fresno. And I was even involved in a Black Hawk incident when we were doing convoys in Panama. There was a helicopter crash, and the helicopter got tangled in some power lines, and no survivors, chopped everybody up. It was gruesome. So anyway, in my dream, this helicopter comes down, lands, the door opens, and we hear a voice say, "Get in." And so we're not arguing. We just want the heck out of there. So we jump in the helicopter, the door shuts, the helicopter flies up into the sky, and then suddenly dive bombs. And we're glued to our seat. This helicopter shoots into this tunnel. Now, word to the wise, helicopters should not fly in tunnels. They don't normally fly in tunnels, maybe with Tom Cruise, but no other circumstance on this planet.
Yeah, that doesn't normally happen.
So the helicopter flies through this tunnel, comes out the other end, and there's some power lines. And I know from personal experience, you don't want to get close to power lines with a helicopter. Whoever's flying this helicopter not only dodges the power lines, but he does a flip around the power lines to like prove a point. What exactly, I don't know, but we're like freaking out. He does a flip around these power lines, and then he flies way up into the sky, and suddenly everything kind of calms down. And then the first rays of morning sunlight come into the helicopter, and the sunrise has just popped up over the horizon, and there's these like endless fields of golden wheat, and it's this awesome, incredible, peaceful experience. Just flooded the helicopter. We're just feeling peaceful, and all of that weight and and stress about like we're going to get killed any second. That's just gone. And it occurs to me, I'm like, wow, I feel so good. Now, who is this pilot? I look forward and I look into the pilot's seat, and I see an indentation in the chair, and I see the controls moving around, the pedals moving around. The pilot is invisible. And then I sit back in the chair in the back, and I look at my buddy, and I said, the pilot's invisible, dude. And we're just like looking at each other, just confused, like, what is this? You know, what kind of a pilot can make himself invisible? You know? So we're confused. Suddenly, the helicopter lands. The door opens. And I hear a voice say, get out. So we both jump out, and then the voice says to my friend, no, you get back in. So my friend gets back in, and then the door shuts, and it flies off. And I look around, and I'm in the same place where I was taken, except everybody's dead. There's all these dead bodies all over the place, expended ammo cartridges laying on the ground. There was this huge firefight, obviously, after we were taken out of there, and all the people were killed. So we were just pulled out of something in the nick of time.
So in your dream, you guys were spared from a disaster.
Yes. And I turn around and I see the gate to the compound, and it's wide open. So I sort of trepidatiously start walking toward the gate, and I go through the gate. And as I'm walking, I feel this level of freedom. That's just all this weight on my shoulders just lifting off, and I feel so free and so light. And then I wake up, and I'm sitting there in the bed, and I sit up in the bed, and I know something significant happened. Like, okay, I dreamed something. I feel really good. I haven't felt this good in a long time. What is going on? And I'm recounting the dream, and then I finally get up to the part where there's the invisible pilot. And I'm like, okay, there's a visible pilot. Who was that pilot? And I'm talking to myself in the bed, just thinking, just thinking out loud. I wasn't expecting an answer, but I got an answer. I heard the name Jesus in my ear. Like, Jesus. Like, loud. And it was earth-shattering. And along with the answer came this love that just gushed through me that was unbelievable. And it took me back to these visions of heaven that I had when I was 12 years old. And it was just that same intoxicating, pure love of God that just washed over me. And I felt Jesus right there in my bedroom.
Okay, well, let me ask you this, because we are getting ready to, we're getting a little closer to the end of the podcast, and there's something I really want to touch on. One of the big interesting things, this was almost like a, this was a spiritual moment, kind of awakening moment for you that you just had. What I want to know is to me, at this time, you're still a believer in the paranormal UFO side of it.
Very much.
And the thing with your books is you have you combine the Christianity and ufology together.
Yep.
Now, I want to, and I'm sure now a lot of this is covered in your books, correct? What you're explaining to us here on
correct.
Correct. Where does that? What is your belief system on that? What is your belief system whenever we look off in the skies, or what? At the beginning of the show when I talked about the Tic Tac spotted the cylinder UFO earlier this week. What do you think is going on there? And I've heard some people say that, the aliens are angels. So what is your take on that? Or
they
demons?
are, by definition. But the Bible says that there's faithful and fallen angels. So they're both. So unlike a lot of Christians, I don't just put a demonic label on everything and call it good. That day that I woke up from that vision, it was like my Ebenezer Scrooge moment. I had new eyes. I was ready to just throw away everything, right? But the first thing that popped into my head is like, I got to read the Bible. I started reading the Bible, and 2 pages or so in, I'm in Genesis chapter 6, reading about angels mating with humans and having children that were giants. And I'm like confused, like, wait a second. I didn't know this was here. I remembered the vague story about David and Goliath, but where do these real giants come from? They're genetically different. I know what this is. These are aliens mating with humans and having children. They're giants, but they were fallen angels. And so that just basically opened up my world, and I felt like I just took the red pill, and my head just started populating and connecting all these dots. As I was reading the Bible, page after page after page, I'm just seeing paranormal on every page, except with a new foundation. Like, I accept the Bible what it says, and I put the Christian statement of faith, like, what do I actually believe as a Christian? I put that on my website, my core beliefs, which is basically standard Christian. Turned out I didn't know a whole lot about the Bible. I would have said I was Christian. I didn't even know what the Trinity was. I kind of bought into evolution and a little of this and a little of that, and things that bothered me, I just picked it out and threw it away. But now I was like, no, this is my foundation, my platform. So unlike Ancient Astronauts that you see when you watch the show Ancient Astronauts, almost every episode, they like to pick God out of the Bible. They like to say aliens planted humans on Earth. God didn't actually make humanity. Let's just take God out. Turns out that aliens / angels, fallen angels, B'nai Elohim in Genesis 6, that's what they were doing back then, thousands of years ago. That's what led to the flood of Noah. They wanted to replace God. They wanted to be worshipped, and they still do.
Wow,
and Jesus
not
said,
here.
yes,
That is
Jesus
interesting.
said, as in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the coming of the days of the Son of Man. So out of all of history, Jesus singled out the days of Noah with otherworldly beings interfacing with humanity and crossing genetically with them. He singled that time of history out and said that that's what it's going to be in the end times when I come back. So I have these notions, these ideas, and I have 750 plus scriptures that I quote to support my research, that when the rapture happens, this is an event that Christians talk about in the future, when God comes back for his chosen, that is going to literally be a mass alien abduction. But they'll be good guys. The world is going to see them as a hostile force. They're going to interpret that as like, oh my goodness, for good reason. Like, a big, huge chunk of the population, maybe as much as 500 million people, I don't know, are just going to vanish. And, maybe NORAD will pick up some stuff, you're seeing these, craft coming toward the planet. We don't know what this is about. Hopefully they're nice. I don't know if it's even going to show up on TV or not. It's going to be stealthful. The Bible talks about it as stealthful. Jesus said it'll be in the blink of an eye. And then, boom, all these people are going to be gone. These are angels, and they're in their angelic chariots. Put 2 and 2 together. I don't think an angelic chariot looks like, some guy on his horses, like you had, here's concepts, right? You got people floating up in the sky. You got, okay, here's angelic chariots, right? No, I don't think so. I don't think they look like this. Horses of fire, I don't think so. I think that what Ezekiel saw in Ezekiel chapter 1 and 10, and what took Elijah up when he was taken away in a chariot and flown off to heaven, I think that was a UFO, and I think the rapture is going to be some stealthful thing. Maybe beams of light will come down or whatever, but people are just going to be poof, gone, teleported up. And it's going to be in the blink of an eye. And then that, turns out, is a trigger, because the Bible talks about something called a restrainer. And this restrainer is currently in the earth, and it's preventing all of these bad guys from totally infiltrating this planet. So you hear different people in the Ancient Astronauts and all that. They have all these theories about the dynamics of why don't aliens just come and reveal themselves if they're real and blah, blah, blah. Well, the Bible actually tells you. The Bible tells you that we have all these factions out there, faithful and fallen. We have God's angels protecting us, but it's actually the human spirit. Adam and Eve were given dominion over the earth. We still have a lot of supernatural power, humanity, especially believers, because we're gifted. And we are a restrainer. being here. We're keeping the enemy out. We're keeping the Antichrist from punching into this reality and taking over the planet. But when we're removed, that restraining power is gone.
That's going to be okay. So this is something, first of all, I mean, to be honest, I hate that we're almost out of time here because I think we're getting right in the middle of the good juice here of your story. And I'm totally on board kind of what you're saying, now I'm more of a, like I said, I consider myself a spiritual person. I don't belong to one certain religion, but I do really dig where you're going with the way you are, actually the kind of way you're making sense of everything that goes on in the ufology and the Bible. It makes a lot of sense to me. It really does. Let me do this, John. First of all, before we get out of here, where can people buy your books? Where can they learn more about you? Please let the viewers know.
All right, so here's my website. It's my display name. www.johnmilor.com. It's my main website, but I do have other landing page websites that are easier to remember that are named after my books. ChristianUfology.net, StrongDelusion.net, AliensandTheAntichrist.com, AliensInTheBible.com. Aliens in the Antichrist and Christian Ufology are essentially the same book. Christian Ufology is the second edition. So it has just a little bit more and it's a little bit more updated. So you can safely skip Aliens in the Antichrist and go straight to Christian Ufology if you want that. And this is also my email address. And I'm not doing this, trying to make a buck or whatever. Anybody that wants any of my books, I will email you for free if you just email me. Not to say that I wouldn't totally appreciate, somebody buying a book or two. It took like 30 years to, research all of this and put everything together into Christian Ufology and the Strong Delusion. But I don't want to let money get in the way. I don't want to hamper the message. I think it's way, way too important that people understand what's coming their way in the days ahead. So please email me. And I also asked that they would consider giving me reviews on Amazon if you like what you read.
Sounds great. This sounds super interesting. Guys, be sure to check out John's books. Go check out and give him an email. Like I said, he'll send you one. So many, 13 in all, correct? I tell you what, John, we're going to have to get you back on here, man. We didn't even touch base on this ancient astronaut stuff. There's just
barely scratched it. I've had 4-hour interviews, by the way.
Well, yeah. You got plenty to bring here, brother. Well, man, I want to say, first of all, John Milor, thank you so much for coming on Beyond the Tinfoil Hat. You were fantastic. And, like always, let's do this. We need to get you back on here. We need to do a part 2.
I'm totally game for it because I did feel like that was actually my halfway point.
Awesome. All right, John. Great guest, great stories. I can't wait to get you back on the Beyond the Tinfoil Hat, man.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right, guys, that is our episode. I hope you enjoyed that. So much interesting stuff. We were just getting to the juice, too. So, we're going to have to get John on here for a part 2. I do want to do this. I meant to mention at the beginning of the show, guys, don't leave because we got a huge announcement. I'm going to say it right now. Starting May 12th, the Tesla Network, Beyond the Tinfoil Hat podcast, is going to be teaming up with the UFO Paranormal Radio Network. Yes, we're going to be part of a bigger podcast producing network, all right? And this podcast is going to start at May 12th, Tuesday evenings at 6 p.m. Okay, now that doesn't start till May 12th. We've got one more Thursday night show next week, but after that, we're going to be at Tuesdays at 6 p.m., and we're going to be working with the good folks of the UFO Paranormal Radio. This is a much larger network, so it's really good news here for Beyond the Tinfoil Hat. It means we're growing, yes, in front of more eyes. So you guys be sure to tune in then and catch us on Tuesdays at 6 p.m. But next week, we've got our last Thursday night show at 8 p.m., and we got Brett Elders. So you guys be sure to tune in. Thank you, Live Light. Thank you, Don Marie, for your awesome questions. And like always, folks, keep the paranormal normal And I'm your host, comedian magician Danny Whitson, and I'll see you guys next Thursday. All right, that does it for this episode of Beyond the Tinfoil Hat. A big shout out for tonight's awesome guest, and a bigger shout out for everyone who tuned in. And if you haven't done so yet, be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube or wherever it is you listen to your podcasts. And like always, be sure to stay curious, heed the world, and keep the paranormal normal. I'm your host, Danny Whitson, and this has been Beyond the Tinfoil Hat.